Hello, everybody. So, yeah, I'm glad to see everybody here. Even though you knew my name was on the list to preach, you're actually still here. I'm glad to see that. Yeah, no, actually Limpopo, eh? All the way in Limpopo, in the very hot Limpopo. But we are back. Thank you for that word, brother. We really do appreciate it. All right. So we heard last week about Gideon. Now, for some of you that don't know, I think Pastor David will not be too angry with me if I say this, but the preachers, we are trying to go through Hebrews 11, and we're looking at the people in Hebrews 11. And today I'm dealing with one character that everybody should know pretty well. Now, this character is one of my absolute favorite characters, and it's actually a character that I find a bit of a challenge, in the sense of the challenge that I have with this character, and I'll explain in a moment who it is that he's so prominent in the Old Testament. 28% of Genesis is this one character, this one person. 28% of the entire 50 chapters of Genesis is just him. But yet, in the New Testament, you find about 14 references in total. That's odd. And I was pondering about that. This character is Joseph. So I'm going to give you a quick summation for those that don't know the life of Joseph. Joseph is the son of Jacob. Jacob is the son of Isaac, and Isaac is the son of Abraham. All right, so they are what we call the patriarchs, 12 patriarchs. And from them, all the children of Israel came. Jacob's name was changed to Israel by God himself, and you have Joseph is one of the sons. Now, there's a lot we can say about Joseph, but what we are focusing on is what the Hebrew writer focused on. Now, I just want to quickly read two scriptures before I go into Joseph itself. And this is what I've just always had. When I've read Hebrews 11, I had the following in mind. If you go to Hebrews 12, you speak about the cloud of witnesses. And you see in Nehemiah 9, verse 12, by a pillar of cloud, you led them in the day, and by a pillar of fire in the night, to light for them the way in which they should go. It's again restated in Exodus 13:21. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and at night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from the people. Now you have Jesus saying he's the light of the world. That's one reference we can make there. God himself says he's a consuming fire. There's many references we can make. The cloud of witnesses. So we look at these people's lives, like Hebrews 11, and we can see how they lived. In Romans it said, these things were written for you to follow their example. Now, there's a point we're going to make later, but let me go to Hebrews 11:22. Now, if you know the story of Joseph, I find it actually very interesting. There's literally just one aspect of the entire life of Joseph that the Hebrew writer takes. Do you think he takes the dreams that he could show? Do you think that he took his courage when he sold into slavery? Do you think that he focuses on the fact that he forgave his brothers? Do you think he focused on the fact that he was in a pit and he became a governor? No. He focused on literally one aspect, and it's written, by faith Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones. What an odd thing to focus on. What a very odd thing to focus on. But I'm going to take two main categories from this one verse. Now, I'm breaking a rule that I've had in my entire life. Never make a sermon on one verse. But I have to. Hebrews 11 gave me one verse. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at, like our brother said, the way he lived. But we're going to look at the way you die and the way you live. We can find those two concepts in this verse. So let's see. I know it's a very somber topic, so I'll start with the somber one first. Then we'll go to the more encouraging second. Hebrews 11:22. Now he's speaking about, and let me just remind you, at the end of his life, made mention of the Exodus. There's a verse just a little bit prior that reads the following, Hebrews 11 verse 13. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. Exiles. Now think about just one interesting aspect of Egypt at that time. If you read, they refused to eat with the Hebrews because the Hebrews were deemed lesser people than the Egyptians. They were deemed completely a lesser people because they were shepherds. You even see that when Jacob comes before the Pharaoh, he says, but you are a shepherd, he was deemed to be less. But they wouldn't even eat with them. But God turns around and gives them the best portion of the land. These people, they don't even want to eat with them because of their status in their culture, is given the best portion of the land. That's amazing to me. But that is actually also the providence of God, because that allowed the Hebrews, the Israelites, to actually live in Egypt without intermarrying with the Egyptians, because they would see them as lesser people. So they could stay a pure, undefiled Israelite community. They could be holy within Exodus. They could be holy within Egypt. Literally, that I think Paul actually takes on that when he says, be not like the world, be separate from the world. Change your mind. Don't be like the world. That's the same with the Egyptians. But I want to go a little bit further. So that made me think, who else had this testimony of dying in faith? Now, if you don't know the story of Pastor David, ask him one day to share his testimony. And part of his testimony was, if I remember correctly, the way his mother kept faith until her passing. The way that she did not, the suffering she went through, she kept her faith. And there's many people that had that testimony. They couldn't understand how this person on a deathbed are going through this. I myself had a friend that he was paralyzed literally from the waist down, from here down. He only had his arms. But I'm telling you, God sent people to his bed to convert to Christianity. He prayed from his bed, and family members or friends that he hasn't seen in 20 years would all of a sudden make their way to his bedside. And he would preach to them and get them to convert by his bedside. Not even going out, lying in a bed, he converted people. He converted people from Muslims, from name them, he converted them. That for me is absolutely a testimony. And when he died, two people were at his bed. And unfortunately, I couldn't make it that day. They told me literally he died with a smile on his face. How do we pass? Because that will, the faith you have while living will be seen at the time of your death. And I know, sorry for the topic, but it is a very somber topic. But I think Hebrews is actually giving us this, and I want to show you that Hebrews is kind of forcing it on us, but I'll get to that. Let's look at David. David, in 2 Samuel 23, is also recorded what he said on his deathbed. Let me read it to you. It's in 2 Samuel 23, verse 5. If my house were not right with God, surely he will not have made me an everlasting covenant, arranged and secured in every part. Surely he would not bring to fruition my salvation and grant me my every desire. Now just consider the life of David. Do you think that it was his desire to be pursued by Saul? Do you think it was his desire to be pursued by his own son, Absalom? But when he passed, he looked back at his life and said, if I'm looking at my life, all that I wanted, God gave to me, because he looked at the things that he wanted, that is of value, was the things God gave to him. And what did David value? I want to build a house for the name of the Lord. And that house was built. And that was the most magnificent structure. I mean, just the disciples walk with Christ and says, just look at this place. It's amazing. Just by the way, if you didn't know, Christ looked at that building and said, it will be broken down because there was a better temple to come. Us, as a living body. But there's David. So David had security in his salvation. This is the man, as Pastor David said, that committed a very serious atrocity against Bathsheba. This is a man that had a guy killed. This is a man that did a census when he shouldn't have done it. But still, when he died, he said, I am secure in my Lord. Let's look at Paul, 2 Timothy 4. 2 Timothy 4 verse 7. So if you want to look at that, you can just, at the beginning, I love it when he says, I charge you in the presence of God and of Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ. So Jesus is already a long time in heaven by that time. But he's saying, in the presence of God and Christ, I charge you. He's putting Christ on the same footing as God there. Just a passing note. Now, here's what he writes. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. We just heard about Christ is coming. So are we looking at Christ coming in fear of judgment? Or we're looking at, like Paul is looking at, my Lord is coming and I'm getting a crown. He had no concern about when Christ comes and said, but you did this and you did this. And he knew I kept the faith and I kept myself in the will of God. I want to have that faith. To be able to say, when I look at the appearing of Christ, I want to look forward to the appearing of Christ, not in dread, not in fear. But now the question is, that arrogance, or is that just faith and confidence? It's not arrogance. He knew his Lord, and he was mindful of what God has done. Another great man that had inspiring words on his deathbed was Peter. Now, we don't really always think about it, but Peter says, I'm about to lay down my earthly tent. So these are the things he's saying is happening soon. So this is one of the last things he said before his passing. And what does he say? I'm going to read this slowly that you can actually take this in. For this very reason, make every effort to add to faith virtue, to virtue knowledge, to knowledge self-control, self-control perseverance, to perseverance godliness, to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love. Now, just bear with me. Where's brotherly kindness? At the very top of the list, above godliness. Now, I might be wrong, and someone might correct me if I'm wrong, but for me, I do see it as a more virtuous tier. You're going to more virtuous. And because in 1 Corinthians 13, you will read, there are three, faith, hope, and love, of which love is the greatest. This list ends with love. So love is the greatest. So this goes to the greater. And right before love, we get brotherly kindness. You can say brotherly love, you can say brotherly charity. But this is how important this is to God. And that's why I was sitting here last week and we had a bit of a struggle here with the sound, and I was actually happy about it. I was rejoicing in it because nobody here walked out. Nobody here was booing them. Nobody here sat in fear, what if we can't get it right? Nobody here was even slightly bothered by the fact that the sound was a problem. Yes, maybe the professionals might have. But even if Noel decided, listen, I'm going to take my guitar and we go solo, we just go here acoustic, we would have been happy about it. Because for us, we are just here as a family. Brotherly kindness. But I want to just hit on that last section one more time. When we think about Joseph and you think about church, if you want to speak about a messed up family, look at the family of Joseph. If you really want to look at a messed up family, and I'm sorry, they are patriarchs, but the truth of their lives have been written for us. Brothers wanted to kill their own brother. Betrayal, Jacob betraying Esau. And I mean, that was one messed up family. But God still chose them. And this is us as a church as well. And I beg and plead with God in prayer that we can be that church. And we are, as a men, we have, as it was said earlier, we've started to reach that place where we can actually speak to one another. The one verse that I've always baffled me, that's one verse I'm carrying with me on a daily basis, is Paul writing Timothy, and he says, I know your tears. That means Timothy was vulnerable enough to share, and Paul knew about it. Paul listened, and Paul cared. It wasn't just, yeah, well, it's your problems, God will provide, and I'll move on. He actually, he carried it with him. It was a burden he carried with him. And I want to be in that place. I want to be in the men's where a man can sit there and trust the men surrounding him so much that he can break up in tears and say, here's what's going on in my life. Knowing it's a safe place to be open to each other. Now, why do I say that this section of on the deathbed is kind of forced on us? Just read from verse 20. By faith, Isaac invoked future blessings on Jacob and Esau. When did this happen? On his deathbed. He was literally dying when he called the sons to him. Now, this verse again is a challenge for me. Because his blessings on Jacob and Esau. Where did Jacob bless Esau? In the sense that we find blessing. Where did he bless Esau? After the blessing of Jacob, he's now speaking to Esau, and he says, but you will not have a fruitful life on this earth. People will chase you. You will not have peace on this earth. He's declaring over him how bad his life will be. Hebrew writer looks at that and says it's a blessing. Because it's still fulfilling God's will. For Esau, it wasn't a good time, but it actually was God's will. So it's still regarded as a blessing. By faith, Jacob, when dying, again, the Hebrew writer goes out of his way to make this aware to us. By faith, Jacob, when dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, bowing in worship over the head of his staff. And thirdly, then, of course, Joseph, at the end of his life. So do you see what the Hebrew writer wants to have you think about? When you are on your deathbed, what will be your last thoughts? Will your last thoughts be, who's getting my house? Will the children be taken care of? Is your last thoughts, is my will in order? Is your last thoughts, will my medical bills be paid? Or is your last thoughts when you're lying there, my God, my Christ, the coming of my Christ? What is your last thoughts when you are going to lie on your deathbed? But, so just four things that I mentioned here. Think about Jesus and his faithfulness to keep his promise. Be confident that you followed Jesus and hear, well done, full and faithful servant. Be confident you taught your children to follow Christ. Be confident you showed your children how to follow Christ. Because you can teach them, but they learn more from watching you. So can we, like Paul said when he's lying there, I have completed my journey. I have kept the faith. Will we be able to say that on our deathbed? And that's also now tying in with how do we live for Christ? Because in this verse, you see here how the people, the men of God, how they met their end. But how we live. All right. Do you live waiting to die, or are you dying to self, hoping to live forever life? I want to be in a position where I'm dying to myself to be able to live. I don't want to just live for myself. But what else we find here? Now, it's mentioned here of the Exodus. I love this. This word mention, if you go into it a little bit in the Hebrews, I mean the Greek, I'm not going to try even to pronounce that Greek word. It was a difficult word, I'm going to promise you that. But it says to remind of. Now, what does this actually teach us about Joseph? Joseph honored his father with that statement, and he honored God with that statement. Why do I say that? Because this comes down to a, a promise that was made to Abraham. In Genesis 15, verse 13, then the Lord said to Abram, this is now Abram before he became Abraham, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in the land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be affected for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterwards they shall come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You will be buried at a good old age, and they shall come back here in the fourth generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So this promise, Abraham taught to Isaac. Isaac taught to to Joseph. And Joseph now looks at his brothers. Because we read the verse, let me just read what is quoted by Hebrews is Genesis 50, verse 25. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. Now, I can't be sure if that children of Israel is his brothers, because I mean, this is now Joseph passing away at a very old age. He was not one of the older brothers, he was one of the younger brothers. So, it's most very likely that some of the other people, like Reuben and Simon and Judah, have passed away by that time. So, again, they carried this message over to their sons, and he could remind them of the promise that God made. That for me is amazing. For me as a father, looking at my son, saying, but I have to teach that son. That's what Joseph did, and he brought honor to his father. Because we can look at the life and say, but he was faithful to God to teach him and all his other brothers. That for me is amazing. But Joseph made them swear. Not just, listen, God said it, maybe it's come true, maybe it's not. It's been 360 years already. Nothing has happened so far. Maybe it's coming, maybe it's not. No. He said to them, swear to me, you will take my bones. This is happening. God said it, it will come true. Swear to me, you'll take my bones. That is absolutely amazing. The confidence that he had is that God said it, God will do it. There's no two ways about it. That for me, that's so, sorry. But now just think about honoring your father as well. When Joseph made Israel swear, then Moses took his bones. Think about that. They get the word, listen, we are moving. Tonight we have Passover, and then we're out of here. It wasn't like, listen, a month from now. It was a move it, guys. So while everybody else is plundering Egypt, getting gold, getting silver, getting cups and plates, what does Moses do? Where's the bones of Joseph? Where is that Joseph? We made a promise to Joseph, and we will keep it. We're not going to break. Now, Moses is from Levi. It wasn't even his patriarch. But he said the promise was made, and we will keep it. I find that absolutely amazing. That his determination of Moses. Again, I want to have the faith of Moses to say, while everybody's looking at grabbing what they can on this earth, I want to be grabbing what has God promised for me. Like our brother said here, winning souls. The wise man wins souls. Are we actually doing that? In this week, I had that very challenge. I was early to a client. Now I can just sit there in my car. I have an extra 15 minutes. I can catch up on a few emails. I can make a few phone calls, read a few articles, whatever the case would be. But as I stopped there, 3 Jehovah's Witnesses stands on the corner. And immediately I felt, Go speak to them. I mean, one of the things that I devote myself to is the study of other religions like Mormonism, and so I know what they teach. And God said, "Well, there they are. Go speak." And all of a sudden, I sit there, but I said no. I got out and I went, and I had one of the most amazing conversations with her. And one of the things that I loved about it is she said, "Listen, we've been standing here for 2 hours. You are the first person to come to speak to us." That is that, and I've walked past them a few times where I had the time, where I could have went up to them, I could have gone to speak to them, but I have not. And that I was very convicted on that day. But now I want to mention, so it's Moses takes the bones, and then go another couple of 100 years in the future, and Joshua, we read in Joshua 24 verse 32, that the bones are now buried in Shechem. Now Shechem was given to the tribe of Israel, after to the tribe of Joseph, and it's buried in Shechem. Now very, very, very interesting for me, near Shechem you have Sukkoth, and Sukkoth is where the Feast of Booths were given. The big feast of booths with unleavened bread, and that is given there at Sukkoth. And there's actually sorry, if you read Joshua, it says it's a place where Jacob built an altar, and he called that altar the Lord is God. So that's the place. At the place that's called the Lord is God, that is where Joseph is buried. That's for me awesome. So I felt a little bit like a dog because I was chasing the bones. But that's what happened. But think about just the devotion there. I mean, Israel had many mistakes, but God provided, even through the faults of Israel, to fulfill the desire of Joseph's heart. Joseph said, I know the promise made to Abraham says, we are going back to Canaan, and my bones must go with. And God made it happen. God made it so. Another person that I love who got the desire of his heart was Moses. Moses is confronted by Joshua. Why are these people prophesying? The 70 men came forward, the leaders, and the Spirit was given on them, and they started to prophesy. And Joshua complaining, but you are the leader. You are our Moses. You should be the only one filled with the Holy Spirit. And he said, oh, may it be that everyone prophesy and be filled with the Spirit. And what happened in Joel 2? What happened in Acts 2? The fulfillment of the heart of Moses. Moses loved God so much, that was his biggest desire. And well, there's one of the desires, I believe, that came to fruition. So David got his temple. Moses got the Spirit poured out. Joseph got his bones buried. Why? Because their desires was in line with God's will, in line with God's heart. Then you will, because God is your portion, then you'll receive what your heart's desires are. So now, I want to try and come to close. I'm not sure. I didn't time myself this time, but hopefully I haven't gone too long. I will be amiss to not make a comparison between Joseph and Jesus. I can't miss the opportunity. This is one of the things that I just absolutely love. But before we go there, the Exodus. I mentioned that he mentioned the Exodus. Now, for those of you who don't know, the theme of the coming of Christ was the new Exodus. Because Christ is the better Moses. He's the prophet like Moses. He is the king like David. He fulfills that role. There's a new Exodus, a greater Exodus. And Christ brought that to fruition. Hosea 11:1 spoke about, out of Egypt I called my son. Speaking about the first Egypt. But Matthew takes it in Matthew 2, and he applies it to Christ. And said, out of Egypt I called my son. Christ is the new Passover lamb. When John the Baptist saw Christ, he said, there's the Passover lamb. So he's the better Passover lamb. So there's a new Exodus. The Passover was the start of the Exodus. That's where it started. Then the angel of the Lord was said, follow him, and follow him, and he will lead you out of Egypt. And it said, of that angel of the Lord, if he forgives your sin, you are forgiven. If he does not, you are not. Christ can forgive sin also. We see that in Mark 2 with the paralytic man. Son, so the people can see that the Son of Man has authority over earth. I say to you, stand up and walk. So he declared his ability to forgive sin by telling him to stand up and walk. But now, comparisons between Joseph and Jesus. Joseph was born to his father in his old age with a barren wife. So you see this miraculous birth. You see that many times over. Isaac, miraculous birth. You see it now with Joseph, miraculous birth. You see it in Samson, miraculous birth. You see it all over because the picture there is the virgin conceiving. It's someone that's not supposed to be able to conceive. A barren woman giving child. The old woman giving birth. It's not supposed to happen. But by God's providence, it does. Joseph was a beloved son. Christ is a beloved son. Joseph was sent by the Father to the children of Israel to go and see what's going on. Christ was sent by the Father also to earth. And what does he say? The next one is Joseph was hated for bringing a bad report of their actions. Jesus Christ said in John 7:7 that the world hates him because he testified about their deeds. And additionally, it also says that he will testify about you in front of the Father. Joseph is testified about the brothers in front of the Father. Joseph was sold as a slave for silver. Now, it was the price of a slave in that time was about 22 silver pieces. If you look at the historical accounts, they sold him for 20 silver pieces. In the day of Christ, 30 silver was the price of a slave. So he was sold 30 silver for the price of a slave. So he was sold as a slave, just like Christ. When he was in the tomb, he is dead. In the eyes of Jacob, he was dead. But he was resurrected. He came back to life. Just like Abraham, the Hebrew writer says, and he received Isaac back from the dead. That's what the Hebrew writer says. That he was committed in his heart to kill his son. So he actually said he received him back from the dead. Same with Joseph. Jacob, the father, receives back his son from the dead. Joseph was imprisoned with two people. One lives and one dies. Christ is on the cross. One lives and one dies. And it's interesting. The bread maker dies. This is my body broken for you. The bread maker dies. This is the new covenant through which we live, the wine. So you actually see the wine live, the bread dies. But again, Joseph with two prisoners, Christ with two prisoners. Joseph was humiliated and then exalted, and he gives bread to the needy. Christ is the bread of life. He was humiliated, he was brought low, and he is now the bread giver. Joseph was deemed dead, yeah. And then lastly, the sons of Joseph came out of Egypt become the sons of the Father. What happens to us? We came out of Egypt, and we became the sons of the Father through Christ. That's your Genesis 48. So you see, there's a lot of, now this is just 10, this is about 30 I can go through, but just giving you a short summation. This is why I said Joseph for me is a challenge. Why is nobody drawing this out? Come on, Paul. Why? I mean, Paul, I was sitting there and said, Paul, you can take a verse about an ox and apply that, but you can't use this. But okay. I trust they were guided by the Spirit. I'm maybe not that much. Okay, then now, may I ask in closing the following question. When you look at the story of Joseph, who are you in that story? Are you Joseph? We always want to be the hero of the story, don't we? We want to be Joseph. We want to be David. We want to be Samson. We want to be the hero of the story. I am not. I am the jealous brother that wants to plot against my fellow brother. I am the brother that gets jealous if another brother gets favor from God. Are you the father or leader that favors one above another? Like Jacob. Jacob should have learned by Isaac. Isaac gave favoritism. Jacob should have learned, but he did not. So are we the father that favors our child? Or the church leader that favors a congregant? But also, now I can go through a long list here. Are we the brother that is forgiven and yet doubt? Joseph reveals himself to his brothers and he forgives them. He sends them back to Egypt, back to Canaan. Go fetch Jacob. They come there. They are forgiven. They're given land. Many years pass. Jacob passes away. And what is their first thought? Jacob. Now that Jacob is gone, now Joseph is coming for us. So even with Joseph blessing them, giving them land, and read this, the portion, in a drought, the biggest drought in history, he's providing for them. With all that, what are they doing? They are in doubt. They're in fear of Joseph. Even though Joseph said, you are forgiven. And Joseph again has to tell them, am I in the place of God? I have forgiven you. How many times are we going to stand and hold ourselves accountable where God has forgiven? We are that brothers. We are the brothers that open a sack and see the money there, and we don't rejoice, we fear. So we see the blessing of God and we don't rejoice, we fear. Now I can go on about the Potiphar's wife, and we can go on all the examples. So if Joseph is the type of Christ, we are most likely the people around Joseph. I am definitely, and this is a daily thing for me, I am definitely the brother that falls on my knees, that begs for bread on a daily basis. And I'm not talking just about physical bread, but I'm talking about spiritual bread. We need to be that brother. But I want to also say this. In Christ, this is the wonderful result of the gospel. What happened to those brothers? The brothers that killed the favored son. Now, when Benjamin is favored, he's favored by Joseph. You can read, he gets a bigger portion of food. Jacob, literally, Simon is in prison. They come to him and say, listen, Simon's in prison. That man says, if Benjamin's not coming back, you're not going. He says, you're not going back. He literally, Jacob says, forget about it, Simon. Cheers. Have a nice prison life. I'm not giving you my Benjamin. But now, when the need pushed them, he let Benjamin go, because otherwise all of them would have perished. Now, Benjamin, the favored son, the cup is in whose bag? Benjamin. And instead of saying, oh, well, Benjamin, sorry, dude, there you go, bye-bye. No, they all turn around. We are going with you. Simon was in prison not long ago. We are going with you. We are not going to abandon you. You are my brother, and you are favored by our Father. We love our Father. We love you. We are going with you. We will not abandon you. What a change of heart. Huh? From the brothers planning to kill. And think about this. Reuben offered his two sons to say, listen, so the first 2-for-1 deal. You can have my two sons. You can kill my two sons if he doesn't come back. Judah, at the end in Genesis 44, I will be your slave. I will give my life for the life of Benjamin. So they go from selling him into a slave to offering themselves and their family members as tribute. What a change of heart, man. From the people that sold them for money to getting money and taking it back to Egypt and said, listen, we found the money, here's it back to you. They didn't try and score the money. But even Jacob had a change of heart. The very Jacob that saw God come through to him time and time again. He fears Esau, God comes through to him. He is time and time again, God delivers him. And yet, here he's faced again with a challenge. And he clings to his Benjamin. But when he hears of his risen son, he hears of his child is alive, come, we're all going. He leaves Canaan, he takes everything. We are going. So there's a change of heart in Jacob as well. So we can go from a place of needy, place of being vulnerable, to being a place through Christ of being victorious, of being fruitful in the kingdom. And that's what I'm hoping we will achieve. So yeah, as we come to a close on the life of Joseph. Now, like I said, I've cut what we can say about Joseph, there's many more, but I've tried to focus on Hebrews 11. So I ask you again, my brother, my sister, when you stand on your deathbed, what is going through your mind? Are your mind so saturated with Christ that what the heart is full, the mouth will flow? That when you're lying on your deathbed, the only thing you can proclaim is Christ, Christ, Christ. May that be all of us on our deathbed. And may we, on our deathbed, look at our life and say, I don't fear coming into God's presence. I wish these days that I must admit, I fear standing in His presence. When I see His holiness, I see that I then need to remind myself again of what He has done on that cross. That the God Himself took that cross for me. There is no higher price that can be paid. So I hope all of us can find rest in that. So I'm going to ask Brother Tino to come and close off for us. But I'm praying to you, if this has touched your heart and you need prayer, you can come to the front. We will stay behind. We will pray for you. If you need someone to just speak to you and you are uncertain about anything, guys, we are family here. We will stay behind. We will speak with you. All right. Thank you, Tino.